Picture this. A researcher hands a modern adult a simple wooden bow and a handful of arrows, then asks them to bring down a fast-moving animal at 50 yards using nothing but instinct and raw physical skill. Most people, even athletic ones, would struggle badly, missing repeatedly, tiring quickly, and probably walking away hungry and thoroughly humbled. Now picture an ancient hunter attempting that exact same task, except this wasn't some occasional weekend hobby for them. This was Tuesday. This was survival. This was a skill sharpened across an entire lifetime of daily practice starting from early childhood. Somewhere along the road toward modern convenience, comfort, and technology, we quietly lost abilities that once represented basic, ordinary human competence. So let's dig into exactly what ancient humans could do that most modern people simply can't anymore, and why losing these particular abilities reveals something fascinating about how dramatically human capability shifts depending entirely on what our daily environment actually demands from us. Let's start with something that sounds almost unbelievable once you really sit with it: raw physical endurance capable of running down prey animals through sheer relentless persistence. This hunting method, sometimes called persistence hunting, involved ancient humans literally chasing an animal, often something considerably faster than a human, across short distances for hours at a time, across brutal heat, until the animal's body simply overheated and collapsed from exhaustion. Humans possess a unique physiological advantage here, since our ability to sweat efficiently across our entire body surface allows us to cool down while running, whereas many four-legged animals rely primarily on panting for cooling, which becomes considerably less effective once they're forced to maintain sustained high-speed movement. This means ancient humans could theoretically outlast animals that could easily outrun them across any short sprint, simply by refusing to stop, tracking persistently across open terrain for hours, patiently waiting for heat exhaustion to eventually do the actual work. This required an almost unimaginable combination of physical endurance, environmental knowledge, and sheer psychological determination that modern humans, even dedicated marathon runners, would likely struggle to replicate under similarly harsh, resource-scarce conditions without modern hydration technology, proper running shoes, or any guarantee regarding when their next meal might actually arrive. Modern humans certainly retain the basic physiological capability for this kind of endurance, but the specific trained skill, the environmental knowledge regarding tracking, and the sheer bodily conditioning required to actually execute this successfully has largely disappeared from ordinary human experience. Now let's shift towards something considerably more subtle but equally impressive: exceptional tracking ability. Ancient humans could examine a patch of disturbed earth and extract an almost absurd amount of specific information from it. How many animals passed through, roughly how much time had elapsed since they passed, their approximate size, speed, and even emotional state, whether they were moving calmly or fleeing in panic. This wasn't mystical intuition, it represented years of accumulated, carefully observed pattern recognition, passed down through direct teaching and repeated practical experience, essentially functioning as a sophisticated visual language that modern humans have almost entirely lost the ability to read. Consider just how specific this skill actually became within many ancient hunting cultures. Experienced trackers could reportedly distinguish between tracks left by an injured animal versus a healthy one, identify roughly how long ago rainfall had disturbed a particular trail, and even estimate an animal's approximate weight based purely on subtle depth and spacing variations within its footprints. Modern humans, generally speaking, walk across exactly this same kind of information every single day without recognizing any of it, since this specific perceptual skill requires considerable dedicated practice that virtually nobody within contemporary society actually needs or develops anymore. Let's talk about something fascinating regarding celestial navigation. Since ancient humans developed remarkably sophisticated methods for tracking location, direction, and time using nothing but careful observation of stars, sun position, and various other natural environmental cues. Long before compasses or any kind of navigation technology existed, ancient humans successfully traveled across enormous distances, crossed open water, and navigated through featureless terrain using detailed knowledge regarding star patterns, seasonal sun position changes, and subtle environmental indicators like prevailing wind direction or characteristic vegetation patterns. This wasn't simply casual, general awareness either. Certain ancient seafaring cultures reportedly developed navigation systems detailed enough to successfully cross open ocean distances spanning hundreds or even thousands of miles, arriving at remarkably small, specific island targets using accumulated knowledge regarding wave patterns, star positioning, cloud formations, and even the specific flight patterns of certain birds known to nest exclusively on particular islands. Modern humans, overwhelmingly reliant on GPS technology, have largely lost this specific navigational competence entirely, to the point where many people people today lie struggle to reliably identify basic cardinal directions without checking a phone, let alone successfully navigating across challenging terrain using nothing but careful natural observation. Now, here's something worth exploring that connects directly toward practical daily survival competence. Comprehensive botanical knowledge regarding which plants were safe to eat, which required specific preparation to remove toxins, and which offered medicinal benefit for treating various common ailments. Ancient humans typically carried detailed working knowledge spanning literally hundreds of different plant species within their local environment, understanding not just basic edibility, but specific seasonal availability, optimal harvesting timing, and often complex preparation methods required to safely consume certain plants that would otherwise prove toxic if eaten incorrectly. This represented a sophisticated practical science, developed and refined across countless generations through careful observation and, unfortunately, occasionally painful trial and error. Modern humans, by stark contrast, generally possess dramatically reduced botanical knowledge, since most people today obtain food through grocery stores rather than direct foraging, meaning this once essential survival skill has largely become unnecessary for ordinary daily life, and consequently has faded almost entirely from common human competence, surviving mainly among dedicated wilderness enthusiasts or specific remaining traditional communities. Let's touch on something impressive regarding fire-starting capability without modern tools, since this represents another skill that once demanded serious competence but has become almost entirely unnecessary for most contemporary humans. Creating fire using methods like friction-based techniques, rubbing specific wood types together with precise technique and sustained physical effort required skill, patience, and detailed practical knowledge regarding exactly which materials worked effectively together. This wasn't a simple, casual task. It required understanding specific wood density requirements, proper technique regarding pressure and speed, and often considerable physical stamina to successfully generate enough friction-based heat to create a flame. Modern humans equipped with lighters, matches, and various other convenient fire-starting tools have almost entirely lost this specific practical competence, to the point where many people today would struggle to successfully create fire using purely primitive methods, even with clear instructions and reasonable environmental conditions. This represents a striking example of skill loss, since fire creation once represented an absolutely fundamental survival competence that virtually every capable ancient adult would have reliably possessed, yet today exists almost exclusively as a niche wilderness survival skill rather than common, ordinary human capability. Now, let's examine something worth appreciating regarding weather prediction based purely on careful environmental observation. Since ancient humans developed remarkably accurate methods for anticipating upcoming weather changes using nothing but attentive observation of cloud patterns, wind shifts, animal behavior changes, and various subtle atmospheric cues. This wasn't superstition or lucky guessing. It represented accumulated pattern recognition developed across generations, allowing ancient communities to reasonably anticipate incoming storms, temperature shifts, or seasonal transitions with impressive accuracy, information that carried survival significance regarding hunting timing, shelter preparation, and various other practical daily decisions. Modern humans relying almost entirely on technological weather forecasting have largely lost this specific observational competence, since there's simply little practical need to develop and maintain this kind of detailed environmental awareness when weather information arrives instantly and reliably through a smartphone notification instead. This represents another interesting example of skill atrophy occurring specifically because modern technological convenience has eliminated the practical necessity that once demanded and maintained this particular ability across ordinary human populations. Let's shift towards something fascinating regarding memory capacity and oral tradition specifically, since ancient humans, lacking written language for the overwhelming majority of our species' history, developed remarkably sophisticated memorization capability, capable of accurately preserving and transmitting enormous quantities of detailed information purely through spoken tradition across multiple generations. Complex genealogies, detailed geographic knowledge spanning vast territories, extensive botanical and medicinal information, elaborate mythological and historical narratives, all of this needed to be reliably memorized and accurately passed down without any written backup whatsoever. This required impressive memory capability that modern humans, increasingly reliant on written notes, digital storage, and various external memory aids, have measurably lost compared toward ancient oral tradition-based societies. Researchers studying communities that still maintain strong oral tradition practices today have documented remarkable memorization capability considerably exceeding typical modern performance, suggesting this specific cognitive skill, much like physical fitness, responds directly toward consistent practice and necessity, meaning modern reliance on external memory storage has likely measurably reduced average human memorization capability compared toward ancestors who simply couldn't rely on any comparable external backup system. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content, covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. Now here's something worth exploring regarding manual dexterity and craftsmanship, specifically related towards stone tool creation. Since successfully knapping stone tools, striking one stone against another with precisely calibrated force and angle to create sharp, functional cutting edges required a sophisticated physical skill that took considerable dedicated practice to properly develop. Skilled ancient toolmakers could reportedly produce remarkably sophisticated, precisely shaped tools through this process, requiring detailed understanding regarding how specific stone types would fracture predictably under carefully controlled striking technique. Modern humans, even those specifically interested in experimental archaeology or primitive skill reconstruction, generally require considerable dedicated practice to develop even basic stone knapping competence, since this specific manual skill has almost entirely disappeared from ordinary human experience, surviving primarily among dedicated hobbyists and researchers specifically studying ancient technological practice, rather than representing common, everyday human competence the way it once did throughout the overwhelming majority of human history. Let's talk about something interesting regarding sensory acuity more broadly, since evidence increasingly suggests ancient humans likely possessed measurably sharper baseline sensory capability across smell, hearing, and vision compared toward typical modern humans, largely because ancient survival depended on maximizing sensory awareness regarding environmental threats and opportunities. Modern humans living within environments generally requiring considerably less sharp sensory vigilance, particularly regarding subtle environmental cues like distant sounds indicating approaching danger, or faint scents suggesting nearby food sources or predators, likely experience measurably reduced practical sensory sharpness, not necessarily because of any fundamental biological difference, but simply because modern environment rarely demands or reinforces this kind of heightened sensory attention. This connects toward a broader, important concept worth appreciating regarding how human capability generally functions. Many of these lost abilities weren't necessarily the result of ancient humans possessing fundamentally superior biology compared toward modern humans. Rather, these skills developed and remained sharp specifically because ancient daily life consistently demanded and reinforced them through constant practical necessity and repeated practice, essentially functioning similarly toward how consistent physical exercise builds and maintains muscle strength, while extended inactivity gradually allows that same strength toward fade away. Let's consider something worth exploring regarding cold and heat tolerance specifically, since ancient humans, lacking climate-controlled indoor environments, generally developed measurably greater physiological tolerance toward temperature extremes compared toward modern humans who spend the overwhelming majority of their time within carefully regulated indoor climate conditions. Research examining populations still living with considerably less climate-controlled technology consistently shows measurably different temperature tolerance patterns compared toward populations living within heavily climate-controlled modern environments, suggesting this particular physiological adaptability responds directly toward consistent environmental exposure, meaning modern humans have likely measurably reduced their natural temperature tolerance range simply through consistent exposure toward artificially regulated indoor climate conditions across their entire lives. Now let's examine something worth appreciating regarding social bonding depth and community integration specifically, since ancient humans typically lived within considerably smaller, more tightly integrated social groups where every single community member maintained deep, ongoing relationship with virtually everyone else within their immediate community. Modern humans, despite living within a world offering unprecedented connectivity through digital communication technology, often report experiencing considerably shallower, less intimate social connection compared toward what ancient small group living likely provided naturally and consistently throughout ordinary daily life. This particular lost capability differs somewhat from the previous physical and cognitive skills we've explored, since it relates more directly toward social and emotional experience rather than purely practical survival competence. However, it represents a significant loss worth appreciating, since ancient humans, through pure environmental necessity, maintained deeply integrated social bonds and community-wide mutual familiarity that modern social structure, characterized by larger, more anonymous communities and increasingly digital-mediated interaction, has measurably struggled toward fully replicate despite unprecedented technological connectivity. Let's touch on something worth exploring regarding pain tolerance and physical resilience more broadly, since ancient humans, facing regular physical hardship as an ordinary, unavoidable part of daily existence, likely developed measurably greater practical pain tolerance and physical resilience compared toward modern humans who generally experience considerably less regular physical hardship within typical daily life. This doesn't necessarily reflect any fundamental biological difference, but rather represents another example of how consistent exposure toward physical challenge tends toward building measurable resilience. While modern comfort and convenience, however, lie beneficial in countless other ways, likely correspondingly reduces this particular practical capability through simple lack of regular challenging exposure. Now here's something worth pondering regarding how all of these various lost abilities connect together within a broader, important pattern worth appreciating properly. None of these skills disappeared because modern humans became somehow fundamentally less capable compared toward our ancient ancestors. Human biological capability hasn't measurably changed dramatically across this relatively brief evolutionary timeframe. Instead, these skills faded specifically because modern environment and technology eliminated the practical necessity that once consistently demanded and reinforced them through constant, ordinary daily practice. This represents a fascinating example of skill atrophy occurring purely through environmental and cultural shift, rather than through any actual underlying biological change. Let's consider something worth appreciating regarding what modern humans gained in exchange for these particular lost abilities. Since this trade lie wasn't purely negative or represent simple decline, modern humans generally enjoy dramatically reduced infant and child mortality, considerably longer average lifespan, reduced exposure toward regular life-threatening physical danger, and access toward medical, technological, and educational resources that would have seemed miraculous toward ancient humans. This trade-off represents something worth appreciating rather than simply mourning, since losing certain specific practical skills occurred specifically because modern technology and social structure successfully eliminated many of the serious dangers and hardships that originally necessitated developing those particular abilities in the first place. Let's also touch on something worth considering regarding which of these lost abilities might still hold practical modern value worth deliberately reclaiming, versus which represent skills reasonably left behind as ancient artifacts no longer relevant toward contemporary daily life. Basic wilderness survival competence, including fire starting, water purification methods, and general environmental awareness, likely retains practical value even within modern context, particularly during emergency situations where modern technological infrastructure might temporarily become unavailable. Meanwhile, extremely specialized skills like sophisticated stone tool napping likely hold considerably less practical modern relevance beyond historical or recreational interest, representing skills reasonably left within the category of fascinating historical capability rather than necessary contemporary competence. Now let's explore something interesting regarding modern efforts toward deliberately reclaiming certain lost ancient skills, since growing interest in wilderness survival training, primitive skill workshops, and various traditional ecological knowledge preservation efforts suggests at least some segment of modern society values reconnecting with these historically important human capabilities. Various organizations and educational programs specifically focus toward teaching modern people skills like tracking, primitive fire starting, foraging identification, and basic wilderness navigation, suggesting ongoing interest in preserving and potentially reclaiming at least portions of this otherwise fading ancient human competence. This growing interest reveals something worth appreciating regarding modern human psychology more broadly, since many people report satisfaction and meaningful personal fulfillment through learning and practicing these traditional skills, even when they carry minimal practical necessity within typical contemporary daily life. This suggests these particular abilities might carry psychological or emotional value extending beyond purely practical survival application, perhaps connecting towards some deeper, evolutionarily ingrained satisfaction regarding successfully developing physical and environmental competence that modern, increasingly technology-mediated daily life rarely provides opportunity toward experience. Let's wrap up by considering something worth appreciating regarding what this entire exploration ultimately reveals about human capability, adaptability, and the fascinating relationship between environment and skill development. Ancient humans possessed remarkable practical competence across tracking, navigation, botanical knowledge, fire starting, weather prediction, memory capacity, tool creation, and sensory acuity, not because they represented some fundamentally different or superior version of humanity, but because their daily environment consistently demanded, reinforced, and rewarded developing these particular abilities through ongoing practical necessity. Modern humans, facing an entirely different daily environment characterized by technological convenience and reduced immediate immediate physical danger, have correspondingly developed different practical competencies while allowing these particular ancient skills to gradually fade through simple lack of consistent practical reinforcement. This represents something worth sitting with regarding human potential and adaptability more broadly. The same basic human biology that once reliably produced expert trackers, skilled navigators, and remarkably resilient physical performers remains fully present within every modern human today. These particular abilities haven't been permanently lost through irreversible biological change. They've simply gone dormant through lack of consistent practical necessity and reinforcement, meaning modern humans, given sufficient dedicated practice and environmental necessity, could theoretically reclaim considerable portions of this ancient practical competence relatively quickly compared toward the countless generations originally required toward develop these skills from scratch. So what does this ultimately reveal about the relationship between ancient human capability and modern human experience? It reveals that human potential remains considerably broader and more flexible than our current, technology-mediated daily life typically demands or reveals. Ancient humans weren't biologically superior versions of ourselves possessing abilities modern humans could never hope toward replicate. They simply lived within an environment that consistently demanded, developed, and maintained an entirely different, remarkably impressive set of practical skills compared toward what contemporary daily life typically requires or reinforces today. The raw human capability remains fundamentally the same. Only the specific skills our environment happens toward actively cultivate have shifted across this relatively brief span of human history.